Hey folks, it's Ardwulf. Welcome. I wanted to do a quick video for this week, again about Traveler, which I've been getting back into in the holiday absence of being able to get together for wargaming. I've been doing some stuff with Traveler. Now, as I discussed in the last video, I'm inclined to go in one of three directions for Traveler. One being Classic Traveler, one being the current Mongoose Traveler, and the other being the Cepheus engine, which is the open source, more or less attempt to backfit Mongoose Traveler a little bit more in the direction of Classic. But there's also this guy, which I also mentioned in the video. This is the latest version of the Traveler 5th edition set. There was a Kickstarter for this. I did not get in on the Kickstarter. I can tell you that I think Cool Stuff has this listed, but as usual for any product that I want, they're out of it. But Miniature Market has this, and at a very reasonable price. That's who I got this from. They shipped it very quickly. They've packed it great, so kudos to them. Traveler 5th edition giant slipcase set. There were extra goodies if you got it on the Kickstarter. I did not, so I don't have any of those goodies. It is a very handsome set, and I've been going through it. Now, I'll mention travelermap.com, which is a really just amazing resource for science fiction gaming. Traveler specifically, but it is a model of why I think Traveler is the way to go for science fiction gaming, but that's just me. So we got 3 books: Characters in Combat, Starships, and Worlds and Adventures. This, of course, mirrors the 3 Little Black Books of 1977, except that they're humongous books. Now, I'm going to sit down a little bit and we're going to start digging into these things. So let's say, as I've been doing, that what you are trying to do is say, hey, travelermap.com uses this new Traveler 5 sector format, and I want to generate some sectors. So I want to fool with the world generation system. Okay, so you go to Worlds and Adventures, no problem. Okay, so UWP key on the inside front cover, that's cool. We go in. These are black and white books, by the way, on very reasonable paper, and there's a lot in here, and I have delved into probably 10% of this book so far. We get an introduction to the galaxy here, charted spaces, this little tiny dot in the middle of this giant galaxy, which you can also see on travelermap.com, which again I highly recommend you take a look at. We have the map of charted space, which is this pretty much same old map of charted space that we've had since like 1979, I want to say, something like that. And then we get into the star charting and world creating process. And this is fairly opaque to me. I am kind of figuring it out. And of course, you don't want to do these all, one at a time manually. So I'm, of course, plugging this into Excel with the caveat that it would be easier to write it as an actual program rather than trying to shoehorn it into Excel. But that said, I'm happy with the results I'm getting through Excel. So you've got this process, okay, and you've got, okay, this kind of looks like the process here. And then you go through it, and there are these letter stages which have weird acronyms. ST, SH, AH, PGL-T. This is the UPP, by the way. Don't know why they didn't call it that, but then we go to trade classifications and 3 different extensions, which are neat. I'm glad to see that they're here, although I don't know yet what Traveler 5 is going to do with them, but they're neat. And maybe I'll get into that in a later video. But then we start getting, okay, so we're getting into tables here. So here's this orbital distances between, how do you parse this? That's a good question. That's actually in book 2, as far as determining, in terms of how far ships have to travel, the distances between different orbital bands. It's a little bit abstract, but it's still pretty mathy. There is a nice little MOARN. Everything's got an acronym. Everything's got an acronym in here. MOARN, map only as really necessary. Good advice, but obscured behind a weird acronym. Okay, so here we go with the Regina system. Here's an example system from the Spinward Marches. And we've got sort of everything going through step by step, except it's not really a description. or an example of doing it. It's just the results. So if you were describing the Regina system in the context of the Traveller 5 world generation system, this is the results that you would get. Again, okay. And then we go to elements of system data. So, and this is the Traveller 5 format. There's a couple different ways to present this in either like I think it's a comma delineated format or an undelineated format, and then like a tab delineated format. That's all fine. I'm not concerned about that at all. But here we go. Master System Generation Checklist. And this is not inaccurate. The thing is, though, that if you follow this, you're going to be jumping back and forth to different pages. Okay, so now it's telling me what bases, because to generate the importance extension, I've got to go forward to bases and then go back to do the economic extension. And then to the economic extension, I have to then go back to the UPP. And a lot of this depends on the values in the UPP. All these trade classifications, for example. However, some of these, and it would have been nice to have had these indicated explicitly, some of these are not ones that just are there, right? Like an amber zone or a red zone. How do you determine that a planet is an amber zone or red zone? Well, it's placed in by hand. That's fine. It says that earlier, but it would have been nice on this giant list of categories to explicitly delineate the ones that are like that. These special ones, forbidden, puzzle, dangerous. It doesn't say that anything with this population number is not a puzzle world. One could easily do that. And as somebody that's doing a program to come up with all this stuff, I have to think about this. But then populations, lower populations are just dangerous. How's that work? What is a data repository? I don't know. Maybe it's in here. There is an index, which is nice. Let's actually see. And of course, on the inside flyleaf, we've got a bunch of random charts too. Data repository. This has all the hallmarks of algorithmically generated index. Yeah, data repository is not in here. So I don't know what that is. You've got to decide, you have to determine what orbit the main world is in. The main world is just the most important world in the system, which may be arbitrary. Usually it's obvious. There might be exceptions to that, but in either case, you can arbitrarily pick one as the main world. Well, what orbital band is it in? Well, what type of primary do you have? Well, to get to that, you have to go through all of these bizarro things and then go backward to somewhere. I can't even find it now. Generate system stars. Somewhere you need a spectral decimal. So a lot of the process here is kind of buried in these tables. I think that's really suboptimal. It's in line with my previous impression of Traveller 5, which is that it is quite neat in terms of a resource for somebody who's already kind of a Traveller diehard. But as a game, it's like, wow, if you're trying to figure this out from this thing, Jesus, I mean, good luck. If we go to character creation, is actually worse, if anything. Now, this is, bear in mind, the very first part of the book, or the 3-book set, I should say. We get the introduction to role-playing, which, so you're buying this thing you probably don't need, but whatever, it's traditional to put it in. A brief history of the Traveller Universe, which is cool. Foundations of the Traveller Universe, the basic precepts around which this has been built. And that's fine. A huge description of dice and the way you use dice. Now, Traveller 5, like Traveller 4, has a different core mechanic than the other Traveller game systems, in that it is a roll under mechanic, which is, again, fine, but it does mean that the numbers that you get out of character creation don't necessarily line up with the numbers that you get out of character creation from, say, Mega Traveller, or Classic Traveller, or Mongoose Traveller, which are all roll high systems. You have this interesting idea called a flux roll, which you'll be called upon to do periodically, which is you roll a positive die and a negative die and add them together and get a result ranging from -5 to +5. And then you can apply that to a table. There's neat applications for this in world creation. in that the atmosphere rating should be somewhere around where the world size rating is too, based on the fact that larger planets do a better job hanging onto atmospheres. So that's how that's determined. It's the flux roll plus the world size, and that's pretty cool. But then we have this digression into the money system for whatever reason, and then into humanity, and it does talk about a little bit about aliens in here, but I haven't really seen too much. This is all in-universe traveler stuff. And then we go to the E-hex system. This is the replacement for the old traveler hexadecimal system, where instead of 1 through 15, you had 1 through F. Which we needed because there are now worlds floating around that are tech level 16, which means that they would be tech level 11 in hexadecimal. Well, the whole point of you doing that was you could fit that value in one character. So now we have this system which assigns, it's a base 33 system, which assigns each decimal number to a letter, but it skips I because it's hard to tell from 1, and it skips O because it's hard to tell from 0. But one thing it doesn't do is skip L. Now, I know, professionally, that the lowercase l in many fonts is indistinguishable, including in Courier, from the number 1. So they didn't leave that out, which again is fine. I haven't really encountered a situation where I need to generate more than one of these. But you have conversion charts, and then you have standard units of volume. So already we're getting into this like really fiddly distances and range bands. This is actually something that's kind of been in Traveler for a very long time, is this range band idea. And this is pretty cool. I'm just not sure this is where it goes. There's a big little chapter on this. And then we get into basic world ranges, space ranges. Ranges into gas giants. What is this? I don't know. Strange worlds. What is a strange world? Why did we invent that term? That's in here somewhere, but its place, the placement of this thing appears to be fair. And again, we're in the characters in combat book here. The placement of this stuff appears to be random and arbitrary. This is something that it would have been very nice to, and all this stuff actually would have been very nice to have in book 3, for example. And certainly, this is a. Don't know why this is in here. This ought to be in book 2 with the operating a starship section. Here's something about fame, risk, danger, and threats. I don't know how this gets used. Here's impact of extreme heat and cold. Again, it's cool to have this. There's a lot of neat stuff here. But we're still not getting to the role-playing game part of it. And I'm on page 43. Now we have like some kind of size ranking system. And again, this is something that I've seen used. If you remember the old DC Heroes game from Mayfair, for example, they had this sort of ranking system where you could like rate anything from a peanut to a moon according to this single exponential scale, and then the stats tied into that, and that was cool. And I think this is trying to do something similar. We have a value roll. Maybe this is some kind of thing to keep you from keeping track of money, which again would be cool. Characteristics established found. Okay, so we're on page 46. We're starting to get into characters now, right? Okay, so we appear to have characteristics, except we have this list of like 20 different characteristics, which includes psionics and sanity which again, I don't object to the inclusion of very much of this. But boy, it's a little bit baffling, and I'm not exactly new at this, right? So the way this ends up working, as far as I can tell, is you have, as a character, you have 6 characteristics, but which 6 characteristics depend on your species. So you might have C1 is probably your strength, C2 is probably dex, an alternate C2 is agility, another alternate C2 is grace. You have three different C3s. So how you determine this, I don't know. C6 can be social standing, charisma, caste. C5 can be training or instinct. That would have been EDU. Yep, EDU in classic. And then C4 is just intelligence. So you have this sort of floating characteristic system where the exact characteristics that you have can vary if you're a Varga or something like that. And I use them as an example because instead of social standing, they have charisma, and that's always been the case. So you got to come through the physical characteristics of strength, dexterity, endurance, grace, agility, stamina, and vigor. All characteristics of strength. There are 3 different characteristics for fine physical activity. Dexterity for humans, agility, and grace. Each represents a slightly different physical approach. There are 3 different characteristics for resistance to fatigue. Endurance for humans, stamina, and vigor. Okay, so this is fine, but then how are we using that or determining that? So we go back here, and it looks like from here, we go into, I mean, we've spent like 10 pages just on characteristics here. Is that actually an accurate 47 of 52? Okay, so not quite, like 6, but still. The personal day. So if you're, depending on your stat, that determines your like diurnal period. Okay, that's interesting. So here's all your different physical characteristics and what the different levels in them mean. Here's the thing for birth world and home world. And actually, I'm really happy to see, and they use the Spinrud Marches as an example, which is totally fine, a list of sample home worlds that you could be from. That's always been kind of in the game, but I'm not sure I've seen any particular version of Traveler actually say, okay, here's some examples of where you could be from. You can, in fact, pick anything you want, or even, as I encourage people to do, is just pick stuff off the table and then backfit your reverse engineer, your homeworld UPP from that, and then we can figure out where it is later. Okay, so now we get into careers. Now, careers, of course, are, again, a typical Traveler thing. You have the pre-careers options like education, different academies and stuff like that. Some, but not all versions of Traveler have that. And then you have what looks like 13 different careers where you have a risk and a reward. Okay, this is exactly the same thing as we had before. And you have controlling characteristics, which again can vary. So you have C1, C2, C3, C4. Except that while this is having different characteristics in different slots is kind of a cute idea, if you have a particular action that you're doing, and regardless of what your stat is in C3, it's a C3 roll, then essentially you have one stat, and you're just calling it by 3 different names. And while that's colorful, I don't know what that is really doing in the context of the whole game system. So we have mustering out, which is more elaborate than it has been in the past. And this is, again, this is all fine. Looks like you have the chance for significant modifiers on these rolls because it's a D6 roll, but you can roll up to 12. DM plus number terms. That's interesting. That's very interesting. So I wonder if you can switch careers in character creation like you can in Mongoose Traveler, for example. I imagine you can. Craftsman. Okay, so I'm not going to go through all the different careers. You can pretty much figure that out on your own. This is the last one, though, where we get into, okay, so you could end up, if you're a noble or some other important big shot, you could end up with a land grant. That's neat. Here's fame. You could end up with fame. You could end up with ship shares. And this actually appears to be a relatively compact treatment of that subject, given that nothing else in this gets a relatively compact treatment as far as I can tell. So you have additional background option tables of some kind for the different careers, life pursuits, and experience, which I think gives you some extra little dingus type bonus. Genetics. So this is interesting. So you're rolling 2d6 for each of the 6 stats. And the way that works is you're actually rolling 2d6. So let's say I have an 8 strength. That's fine. But what I rolled to get the 8 strength was a 5 and a 3. So the first die that I have is my genetic strength value, and the second is the environmental strength value. So that means if you get cloned or you have kids, then you inherit or mix with your partner those genetic values to determine those statistics. Again, that's quite interesting. One thing that somebody said about this, I think on Facebook, is that this kind of builds in all of the expansion material, and I kind of agree with that. Here's some family trees, and there's forums for everything in here. Chimeras, these are hybrids of 2 or more distinct species produced naturally or through engineering, like mules or maybe Vargir. There's a little thing about that. Synthetics, organic or biologically based artificial beings. That's cool to have. Clones, here's some clones. You can play clones now. The task cycle. So here's a very lengthy and involved description of how tasks work. So this is kind of an inheritance from Mega Traveler. One of the I don't know if improvements is what you want to call it. It depends who you ask. But one of the things that Mega Traveler introduced was this universal task resolution system. That was something that was developed by Digest Group, and they put it in since the Mega Traveler project was essentially handed to them. And it was, I think, a little more trouble than it was worth. I think it was a good idea. It just should have been a little looser. It was quite mechanistic. This appears to also have that trait, that there's nothing wrong with that necessarily. It's just that I don't know that I necessarily want to deal with this every time I call for a roll in a game. So here we have descriptions of skills. This is turned into a general flip through from my initial impression. So we have different kinds of skills. I'm not going to go through all these. We also have something different called knowledges, which are tied to skills in some way, and this is also something I do not fully understand at this time. We also have talents. These are sort of random little powers that you can have. Compute talent, for example, is if you are a mathematical wizard. Empath is the native ability to sense and understand the emotions of others. Okay, this is all fine. Hibernate, native ability to enter a short-term or long-term state of reduced consciousness. That seems like it's for non-humans, but the rest of them don't necessarily. Here's your detailed or extensive mathematical calculations. So compute sounds like Mentat stuff, where math sounds like Rain Man stuff. That's okay. Here's eidetic memory. So there's actually more of this than I thought. You have the Krebs system, the Krebs Equipment Evaluation System. That stands for something because, as I mentioned, everything gets an acronym here. Quality, reliability, ease of use, burden, and safety. So pieces of equipment can be rated according to this Krebs system. Every individual, gun or even bullet potentially can be rated according to this Krebs system. Again, potential disaster with Krebs. Okay, this isn't what you'd think, where, I could be tracking the Krebs value of each bullet. This is when things fail. And again, is this neat? Sure. I don't know that I would use this, though. The intuitions. Okay, I don't even know what this is. The 3 intuitions, insight, curiosity, and luck. Okay, that's something new. Personals, routinely meet elements of the personal. Purpose, strategy, tactical laws, mod 1, mod 2. I have no idea what this is either. Is this sort of like what are those things called in Burning Wheel? Goals or drives or whatever they're called. I forget what they're called. Doesn't look like that? No. This is personal interaction, looks like. Okay. So here's census. This is actually what I was kind of flipping through to find. So you have 6 or maybe more different types of senses. Again, this is just like the characteristics, and you have, these are the ones that the humans have: vision, hearing, smell, touch, awareness, or perception. So this is based on life force. This is based on auras emitted by all objects. Okay. And there's different senses and formulas for different things that can happen. Here's the benchmarks for vision, whatever that means. Hearing, smell, touch, perception, awareness. I know there are alternate... oh, good Lord. There's a formula you can plug in to determine the range of your hearing. And also for... this is also true for vision as well. Okay, so... and again, is this neat? Sure. Again, I don't know that I would use it. So here's where the meat of the complexity of most role-playing games lies, here in the personal combat section. And there's really not that much to it. Everything else seems massively over-engineered. And yet this is like 8 pages. It's really fairly small. Now you got more for armor types and more for movement and stuff like that. Artillery and ortillery, which is orbital artillery. Ha ha. Military explosions. What do we got here? I'm looking for nuclear weapons. Oh, here we go. Here are the nuclear weapons. This is actually something you should have in a sci-fi game, I think, and very few sci-fi games have actually included rules for nuclear weapons. One of the only ones that I could think of was Space Master, one of the versions of which had an apocalyptic weapon attack table. Environmental effects, back down to here. I'm not even going to get to book 2. If you would like to see me flip through book 2 and scratch my head at the various baffling components, please mention it in the comments below. Yeah, I don't know. But we've gotten a light look through of parts of book 3. Many dice, more dots. We've got a bunch of dice probability tables for rolling different kinds of dice pools. You're basically rolling under a specific number, but you get a number of dice to roll under that number, the number of which increases with difficulty. There's nothing wrong with that. It's relatively straightforward. This is completely baffling, and I am now reluctant to actually post this video because it's been super negative, and I don't want to be super negative. So I guess to sum up here, Traveller 5's pretty neat. It's reinforcing my opinion of it as an interesting resource for the Traveller referee, and as an RPG there that you buy the game and then run the game or play the game. It appears to me to be totally hopeless. So if you disagree with that, please mention it in the comments below. You can even unlike the video if you wish. I would love to have feedback on this, actually. And if somebody has, I know there's some resources on Traveller 5 on YouTube, and that fella appears to have given up partway through it. Those kind of strike me as the kinds of videos that you do when you are trying to figure out something for yourself. I have also done those kinds of videos, so I can completely sympathize with that instinct. If I can get a clear enough handle on the system generation stuff, then I can do a video on that. And I do think there's a lot of potential here. And as stuff that you do behind the scenes, I think this has a lot of potential value. But again, I don't see an actual RPG in here. So it reinforces my opinion of Traveller 5. This is, I'll mention in closing, this is the second version of Traveller 5. It's technically, I think, 5.1. The previous Traveller 5 was one huge giant black book, about the same size. I've looked through it. It's not humongously different from this. Although I like the presentation here a little bit better. I think it's easier to deal with this size book than it is the than the one huge book. And I do like the presentation with the slipcase and the 3 volumes, and they're nice and shiny and they're well printed, and the bindings appear to be reasonably solid. So it's a beautiful looking set, and I'm happy to have it, and I'm still kind of pounding through it. So thanks for watching. Again, if you have comments, questions, anything you would like to see in the future, please mention it in the comments below. And don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. There is more content on the way, including later this week, where we have some wargaming stuff and more Traveller content on the way. I do intend to branch out into other RPG lines as well. It's just that Traveller is what I'm working on right now. So again, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.